Over a year ago, I started my mini-series looking at the craziest cars inside of Gran Turismo 7, and I think it's time that we went ahead and finally did a part 2. However, before we do get into this video, I'm trying to get this channel to 70,000 subscribers. So, of course, if you want to stay up to date with everything GT7 or motorsport gaming related, then feel free to leave a like, subscribe, and turn your notifications on. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into it then. Now, in terms of episode 1, here are the cars that we covered. First up was the Volvo 240 SE, then the Toyota SFR, the shifter car, Honda 2 and 4, Chaparral 2X, Chaparral 2J, Mazda 787B, Escudo Pikes Peak, Ferrari FXXK, and the Tomahawk X. So with that done and out of the way then, let's start part 2 of GT7's craziest cars, beginning first with the Honda N1 RS, GT7's latest K car. So honestly, looking at the price point and the specs, nothing stands out as crazy whatsoever when it comes to the N1 RS. It's a 20,000 credit car, so it's incredibly cheap, and it is very much a K car, meaning that it doesn't have much displacement, it's front wheel drive, and only puts out 63 brake horsepower. However, bear in mind, this is an incredibly lightweight car and it's turbocharged, which means it has a ton of upgrade potential. But what really makes this thing stand out as a ridiculous crazy vehicle has to be that insane wide body kit. Whilst on the surface this is just an incredibly boxy silhouette style race kit, it really does massively transform the M1 when it fits a bunch of upgrades on it. Of course, the N1 over in Japan is used as a bit of a miniature race car, and I really do appreciate the fact that Polyphony went to the lengths of giving it a proper racing kit as well as proper upgrades. The only thing this car is actually missing has to be an engine swap, because who wouldn't want a K20 swap in this thing? For me, it is absolutely one of the coolest, quirkiest cars in the entirety of Gran Turismo 7, equipped with that body kit and a bunch of upgrades, and honestly, you have yourself a crazy little mini pocket rocket. Up next, we have the Red Bull X2014. So this is definitely the complete opposite of the Honda N1 that we saw. This is one of the fastest, highest rated PP cars in the entirety of Gran Turismo 7. However, it's a bit of a forgotten gem and goes incredibly overlooked. Of course, we have the Red Bull Junior, which is easily one of the best 700 PP cars in the entirety of Gran Turismo 7. But it's not exactly crazy. And then we have the X2019, which when it comes to every single Gran Turismo World Series event, that is always the one we see, which means that the 2014 just sits in a bit of a limbo with not really much to do. But what about the price point then? Well, unfortunately, it's not cheap. 3 million credits will get you this one, which again I feel like is another reason it goes completely overlooked. However, it is worth noting in terms of PP rating, this is the highest rated Red Bull of the bunch currently available. It's also worth noting as well that unlike the 2019, this one is turbocharged. Now, in terms of the driving experience here, I have to say that the 2014 isn't as brutal as what we see with the 2019. However, overall, it feels like the best of the bunch for handling all that power and obviously how lightweight it is. It's also the best one to actually race side by side. For me, what makes the 2014 the craziest of the bunch just has to be the way that it handles almost every single corner in the game. Usually if you're in the 2019, you'd expect it to maybe snap away or something, but the 2014 just doesn't do that. It is pretty much on rails, so much so that it feels like it's going to suck your face off when you're racing it in VR. Overall, this is the perfect blend of performance and honestly ridiculous looks. I love it. Next up, the Toyota Land Cruiser. Yes, one of GT7's most recent additions from 1.63 does make the cut, for very good reason. Well, number one, this car was produced for around about 40 years, this specific model should I say, which is just absolutely unheard of today, where cars seem to get replaced every 5 to 7 years or so. But in terms of the rest of it, even the specs don't give away that this is a crazy vehicle. It's relatively cheap at 44,100 credits and only has a PP rating rating of 305.78, putting out 128 brake horsepower. But what if I told you that you can go way above that once you hit level 50, to a ridiculous degree? Yes, the Toyota Land Cruiser received a day one engine swap in the form of the LS7 Rampage, which means the default horsepower just by putting this engine swap in is 748. Combine that with upgrades and this thing can put out over 1000 brake horsepower. Yes, this classic 1974 Land Cruiser could put out over 1000 brake horsepower, and as you can imagine, the results are absolutely ridiculous. I mean, with power like that and the type of vehicle it is, it almost feels like the new Willys Jeep with the Hellcat swap. However, honestly, this thing is just as absolutely ridiculous as all of the other ridiculous jelly cars that you typically see in Gran Turismo 7. And even if you don't go ahead and mess around with the suspension, you're in for an absolute treat when the AI try to drive this thing. It's just absolutely bonkers. Next up on the list is the Aston Martin Valkyrie, and a lot of people did question why this didn't make it into part 1. Well, here it is. There was no doubt in my mind that this car would make this list this time around, as it really is one of the most ridiculous cars in the game. I remember when this first launched and it was on the older physics, putting the power down in this car was just absolutely mind-bending. It was one of the craziest cars I've ever jumped in any racing game, and honestly that feeling's just never really faded away. Now if you do want one of these things yourself, you're going to be looking at putting out a lot of credits, 4 million credits in fact, and in terms of the stats, honestly, the PP rating just doesn't do it justice. 875.35 is very high, but just doesn't seem like it's high enough for this car. However, that is mainly due to the tyre compound being a road compound, and honestly you will need to swap that if you want to get the most out of this thing, as it puts out a whopping 1139 brake horsepower. And it is also worth mentioning that this thing is naturally aspirated, so it is pretty much instant power delivery. Of course, it also has a hybrid system which can be deployed to put out even more horsepower. It's just absolutely incredible. I honestly love this thing. At first when it launched the GT7, it was one of the craziest cars I've ever driven, and whilst that feeling is definitely never faded away, one thing I did complain about was that it was just on the wrong tyres and almost unusable. Stick a set of racing tyres on this thing and honestly you see the true performance that this car has. It is absolutely mind-bendingly fast, and really I just cannot say anything more about it. It is just one of the ultimate driving machines in Gran Turismo 7, and thanks to going to the World Series in London earlier on this year, I actually got to see one in the flesh and appreciate just how ridiculous these things look. So next up then is the Renault Avantime, which yes might sound absolutely ridiculous putting it in a craziest car list, but you have to remember this was a car that was completely ahead of its time. Yes, it is pretty much a minivan, but a very special one at that, with some very unique quirks about it. Not only does it look absolutely spaceship-like, it does also have a specific feature which thankfully Polyphony did add. However, honestly, if you just glimpsed across this car in the Renault dealership, you probably wouldn't even buy it. 50,000 credits is quite expensive for a vehicle that only has a PP rating of 377.18 and puts out 204 brake horsepower, as well as that huge weight at 1741 kg. So overall, it's not looking too impressive so far. But once again, just like the Land Cruiser, this thing got a day one engine swap, but this time around, it's a race engine swap, meaning it completely overhauls the fuel usage in this car to actually be capable of endurance racing. Yes, you can endurance race an Avantime in GT7. Couple the engine swap with some of the ridiculous aero that this game puts in, and really you're in for an absolute treat. It looks ridiculous, but it actually functions as intended. Yes, you can practically turn the Avantime into a full-blown racing minivan, and I absolutely love it for it. Up next is the KTM X-Bow, which for me, alongside the likes of the Aerial Atom, was kind of the first full-blown track toy road cars to begin appearing in this really bizarre shape and form. As we can see, just looks alone would easily put this on any crazy car list. You can see everything working here, including the suspension when you drive up on the bonnet cam. Overall, it just looks ridiculous, but more recently, this has been made even better. Now, I would say for 100,000 credits, you're getting a very complete package here. A PP rating of 595, an MR drivetrain, 298 brake horsepower, weighing only 790 kg, and being turbocharged. For me, this is a great track package as is. But what if I told you you can now make this thing even better thanks to GT7's latest update? Yes, this finally got an engine swap, and once again, just like with the Renault, this is a racing engine swap from the Suzuki VGT Group 3, meaning you can now go endurance racing with this thing. I certainly have to say this as a disclaimer though, this isn't the easiest car to actually tune up when it has the engine swap, but once you've finally nailed down those settings, you're in for an absolute treat. For me, the KTM X-Bow has always been a weird and wacky car, and when it comes to Gran Turismo 7, it's now even crazier. Next up is another car that a lot of people question why it never made the original part, and well, here it is then, the GAC Maverick. Of course, a SEMA winning car that absolutely resembles nothing of the original car it's based upon. And when it comes to the Maverick, it arrived in GT7 and then pretty much implanted itself in game and spread out from there, lending its engine swap to a bunch of cars, turning it into one of the best drag racers in Gran Turismo 7, and of course from there, turning a lot of other vehicles the exact same. Now, honestly, if you were just browsing cars, it's quite easy to overlook the Maverick. If you look at it as a PP rating, 681 really isn't that much until you look at the brake horsepower being 1200 bhp, and yes, it is upgradable, meaning that even when it comes to the swap from this car, you can then go ahead and upgrade it even more in those other machines. I feel like this car is definitely a bit of a one-trick pony. Yes, it's not bad at handling, but it's not really made to go around racing tracks. What it is extremely good at is being a drag racer, and I feel like this thing did absolute wonders for the drag race community, whether it was the car itself or of course the engine that this thing contains being swapped into other cars. Overall, it's absolutely insane. Next up is the Opel Corsa GSE Vision Gran Turismo. Yes, one of GT7's latest cars once again makes the list, and on the surface you should be pretty worried. This is a Vision Gran Turismo car that's fully electric, and instantly that should turn off any player, including myself. I really did turn my nose up at this thing until I actually tried it. In terms of the stats though, it kind of speaks for itself. A high PP rating at 871, almost 800 brake horsepower, 4-wheel drive, and lightweight at under 1200 kg in an electric vehicle, which is pretty much unheard of in GT7. Most of them are incredibly heavy, chunky, boat-like vehicles. The VGT Corsa though is not that. Combine that with active aero and you have yourself an incredible track day package. Yes, it's electric, but honestly this is easily the best of the bunch, and it's not even close. When it comes to the performance, if I had to describe the Corsa as anything, it feels like a futuristic Group B rally car, and I would say the same when it comes to the styling and looks as well. It's got this incredibly aggressive wide body kit on it that feels like Opel took a look at kind of Group B rally cars from the 80s and of course silhouette race cars and thought, yeah, let's do that on a hatchback design with active aero and 4-wheel drive, and well, this is what you get. So let's stick with the VGT theme. Next up is the Corvette CXR, which to me is honestly one of the most disappointing cars that has ever been added to Gran Turismo 7, especially in 2025. But that doesn't make it any less crazy. Of course, a car doesn't necessarily need to be useful or anything as such to make this list, and the CXR is the perfect example of it. Now, it is worth noting in GT7's latest update, this thing did receive a bit of a downtune from over 1000 pp to 931.55, but the stats haven't really been changed. It's still 4-wheel drive, it still puts out over 2000 brake horsepower and still only weighs 1250 kg with a massive turbocharger installed, and honestly this thing is an absolute screamer. Honestly, for the sound design alone, it's one of my single favourite sounding cars in Gran Turismo 7, and honestly it could make the list just for that. But really what we're talking about here is the performance of this thing. Whilst yes, unfortunately it was disappointing that it wasn't really capable for grinding events or really to enter any type of event, what it is left with is the ability to be one of the best hot lap cars you will ever drive. The performance of this thing is just kind of bending time itself. It's insane. For me, this is a car like no other when it comes to racing games. Whilst yes, I expected it to be absolutely bonkers, I just didn't expect it to be this good at a single lap performance. If you want the full experience, go ahead, set up your racing rig, slap on VR and head to the Nordschleife. And honestly, just the absolute sheer speed of this thing makes your heart want to pound out of your chest and then throw up everywhere at the same time. It's just an experience like no other, and it has to be seen to be believed. From one of GT7's more futuristic designs to Gran Turismo 7's oldest vehicle, this is the S-Barca Tourer. Of course, this is the single car I was waiting to show up in the Legends dealership so I could finally go ahead and fully record this video. And well, honestly, I absolutely love this thing. I already had one of them and I've actually bought a second to put upgrades on, which is the one that you see in here. And it's an absolute behemoth of a vehicle. Now really, when you look at the performance of this thing, it's nothing really that surprising. 337.72 pp, a displacement of 6,800cc, FR drivetrain and only 177 brake horsepower, weighing 1,270 kilograms. However, just note the aspiration at the bottom. This thing is supercharged. Now really, most GT7's players, I guess, experience with this car is actually in a music rally. That's really the only time you might actually use this thing in GT7, but if you go out your way to purchase it and then go ahead and actually race it, you're probably going to be in for a shock. Combining this absolutely massive vehicle with extra performance upgrades and those very skinny classic tyres is definitely something to behold, and of course it looks absolutely incredible too. And of course we can't forget that this car is from 1929. Yes, this car is almost 100 years old, and you can go ahead, upgrade it and throw it around some of the most iconic racetracks in the world. And of course, for me, that alone puts it in the craziest cars of Gran Turismo 7. And with that, we conclude episode 2 of Gran Turismo 7's craziest cars. Anyway, if you do have any suggestions that I haven't already covered in parts 1 or 2, then feel free to leave them in the comment section down below, and of course why exactly I should go ahead and include them in part 3. Huge thank you to all of my channel members on screen now, and a huge thank you to you guys watching at home. I'll see you in the next one. Take care guys, peace.